Good morning, everyone. This is June 9th, and welcome to this week's Dynamic Dialogue. Today, we're going to talk about supplier relationships in recovery. So supplier relationships are always important, but now they're more important than ever. So we're going to take a look at what makes that so. These are weekly Dynamic Dialogue webinars. They're open to supply chain professionals, anyone interested in supply chain activities, interested in these activities pre-COVID, during the pandemic, and post-COVID into recovery and beyond, whatever that looks like. We have extended these free through the month of June, and then we are going to go to a subscription basis. So if you want to subscribe, that information is in your follow-up from this, and you can go onto my website, info@purple link, under the tab Events. So this is a forum for sharing thoughts, challenges, ideas, for bringing up questions, bringing resources, discussing lessons learned, because it's never too early to talk about what we're learning from this process and make sure that we're taking note of that and incorporating those lessons learned into what we do into the future. I do a short presentation, then we have a little open forum. We keep them to less than an hour, and the link that you use today is good for the whole month of June. So supplier relationship management has several different definitions. Different organizations define it in different ways. It's often defined as a software program or a module to a software program, an MRP, ERP system, to help manage the supply base. It's also referred to as strategies, tools, processes to manage all suppliers, or sometimes just a select group of suppliers. Some supplier relationship management programs are targeted only toward critical suppliers or strategic suppliers, however they're designated in your organization. I came across an organization the other day that defines them as gold suppliers. So however you define those. Some organizations talk about it as a program to expand collaboration with targeted suppliers. So the emphasis is on the collaboration and innovation, and working with the supply base to get more of that incorporated into the buying organization. But Purple Link defines that as a key component in a comprehensive supplier management program. There are 3 other components, and we're going to look at those once a week from in these Dynamic Dialogue webinars. Purple Link's definition feels supplier relationship management is an enterprise-wide initiative, one that helps companies set a competitive advantage for themselves. If you have a good, robust supplier relationship management, most organizations feel that that is a competitive advantage. We feel that supplier relationship management should be inclusive of all suppliers, with special focus on the critical strategic suppliers. But programs don't have to be limited to just a few suppliers. It is a framework for collaboration and alliances partnering with select suppliers to deliver significant results for both organizations. And that's one of the key things about supplier relationship management is it really is based in collaboration, and it's also looking for how you can deliver significant results, improved results, better results for both organizations. It takes buy-in from both organizations to make this work. So it isn't for all suppliers, but it should target all suppliers to be included in some way, shape, or form. A lot of this is about leverage. Many companies have customer relationship management programs. Not as many have supplier relationship management programs. So the CRM is really a critical part of most companies. They put a lot of emphasis on customers because the customers are making their business viable, and that's as it should be. Supplier relationship management programs are not as common, and they're not as valued within many organizations. They are something that seems like more of a luxury, something of an add-on if we have time, if we have some extra resources. Whereas customer relationship management is usually considered a priority, and organizations almost always find resources and money to support those organizations. In my opinion, in Purple Link's view, both are very important. They are both significant, and they add significant value with proper execution. So they're both very important to the whole supply chain from end to end. Both programs are really about exercising leverage. They're about changing or altering a balance of power or perceived power between the two organizations, the buying organization and the selling organization. They are also targeted to influence another organization to help with particular initiatives, particular goals, or to help with particular projects. They help establish control or the perception of control. Oftentimes you have very little control over your customers or of your suppliers. And these programs really help put some of those controls in place, let other stakeholders understand really where you do have the ability to influence, persuade, what you do have control of and what you don't have control of. They're designed to increase and improve the results and the outcomes from the relationship, from the alliance, from the activities that both companies are performing ongoing to establish the relationship and make the contracts work. And they also conserve resources. Anytime you can combine resources, synergize resources, you're going to be able to conserve and reduce the resources you need to work on something. So that helps all companies. That goes back to productivity and efficiency and all those things. So under normal conditions, or maybe I should say pre-COVID conditions, supplier relationship management programs had a lot of different conditions that they worked under and a lot of different assumptions. Supply chains have always been limited in resources. Their primary focus is to acquire the right products at the right price, at the right time, in the right place, in the right condition. So acquisition of parts is what most supply chain or purchasing organizations are typically focused on. So the supplier relationship management program is looking at those relationships and how to acquire those parts in a more efficient, effective manner. Communication with suppliers is always important, but under normal conditions, a lot of times communication with suppliers is just as needed. When we need it, wherever we need it, on the topics that we are covering today or on whatever the topic of the day is. And it's generally done through the buyer. The buyer has the primary interface with the supplier. Other organizations, other stakeholders like engineers, quality, finance, maybe the accounts payable people, even production and manufacturing engineering can be in contact with the supplier, but the primary communication and the owner of that relationship is generally perceived to be in the purchasing organization with the buyer, with the category manager, whoever the primary interface with the supplier is. There may be these cross-functional interfaces, as I just said, and the relationship is often based on how well the supplier has performed to date, what they're doing for us currently, and it oftentimes relies heavily on the two primary interfacing people, the buyer or the category manager from the buying organization and the account manager or the salesperson from the supplier. So those two individuals set the tone for the relationship. If they have a good relationship, if they have trust, if they work together well, then the relationship is generally considered to be doing well, performing well, going forward, and having no issues. If those two individuals can't reach a conclusion, can't reach a solution, can't reach an agreement, then it expands through other people in the organization. So again, supplier relationship management programs often focus on, in the past, pre-COVID, have focused on negotiating cost reductions. That's a lot of the primary goals of these programs, was to see if we could get better costs through the synergies, through the solutions, through combining the resources and the talents of both organizations. A good goal, but that was a lot of the primary focus. It was also focused on improving poor performance if and as that occurred. So if suppliers that had poor quality, poor delivery were often part of supplier relationship management programs in order to get the right people involved to fix that problem and make the customer happy with the performance of that supplier. Sometimes supplier relationship management was just part of an automation process with an ERP, an MRP system, and an add-on thing, or just trying to get some automation with how you deal with suppliers on an ongoing basis. to automate part of the communication, whether that's forecasts or production plans or whatever the information is, to share notification on updates, to get required information for compliance, things like conflict minerals, lots of other inquiries that companies have to make of their supply base on an ongoing basis. Sometimes it was limited to, again, strategic suppliers, key suppliers, gold suppliers, however you want to refer to those. And these programs tended to value cross-functional input, but they didn't often have them as key stakeholders and primary owners of the supplier relationship program. They were asked to support and to contribute and to be involved as they were required to do and as they felt comfortable doing. So a lot of different things in a few short months ago. So companies were worried about changing, they were worried about improving, and supplier relationship management was seen as a tool to do that. But now that we're in the light of a pandemic, hopefully we're getting toward the shadows of that. I'm not sure about that from all the things I read. I think we're still very much in the throes of it as far as business goes. There's an altered focus now on supplier relationship management. One of the main concerns is assurance of supply, not in the way it was pre-COVID, but now there's many other things to consider. And things have changed so radically, so quickly, that assurance of supply needs extra focus, especially on things like PPE equipment. Companies are starting to go back to work. The country is opening up. Many states, many cities are trying to get back on some kind of footing, some get back to or get to this new normal. So one thing that's required is a lot of PPE equipment in the workplace. Many organizations are requiring workers to wear masks all day or anytime they are not within 6 or 8 feet of someone else, even at their desk sometimes, which can be kind of uncomfortable for many people. And if you can't get that kind of distance for your workers, companies are getting new equipment. They're adding new barriers between workers. They're changing configurations. They're putting up walls where a few years ago they were tearing down cubicle walls. Now they're putting cubicle walls back up so that you have a little bit more barrier between you and the person next to you. So they're looking at all of that kind of thing. And in procurement and in supply chain, we buy that kind of equipment. We have to make sure there are masks, there are gloves, there are thermometers. Sometimes there's smocks, sometimes there's other types of equipment that's needed in the organization. And we're also buying new equipment. We're helping the facilities organization rework the facilities to make that more comfortable, more safe, more less risk for companies to bring their workers back, for workers to come back and to work, not work from home, go back to working on site, which is an important part of getting the economy going and getting the company and that part of the organization back to work. The parts that you buy, the components, the sub-assemblies, all of that availability may have changed depending on who your suppliers are, where they are, what part of the pandemic curve that they're in, and what is going on with their particular city, their particular region, their particular country. It can also have a lot to do with the types of delivery that you have scheduled. The air flights have been greatly reduced out of Asia. The boats have been reduced out of Asia. So if you have parts coming from Asia, that they may be slower than usual. They may be slowed significantly still for some time to come. And on the other hand, they had parts that were delivered and being shipped while the pandemic, the shutdowns were going on. So there was a lot of work in process, a lot of work in transit, and now that has shown up at companies. So companies are dealing with a variety of different inventory levels. They're looking at short stock in some places, they're looking at overstock in other items, and the return to work schedule for your supplier may be markedly different than your company. So you have to coordinate all of those. So in supplier relationship management means reaching out to suppliers, communicating, understanding all of those aspects of assurance of supply right now, right now for the next 3 months, and then in the longer term. But a lot of the focus is in what do we need to do in June, maybe June, July, and definitely how are we going to get through the summer. So there's a lot of emphasis on that. Risk assessment. We all have been shocked awake, I guess, with all of the risks in supply chain. So now we have to assess that risk and manage that risk and handle this going forward. So one of the main things on a lot of companies' minds are, what is the condition of my supplier? What is their financial condition? How has this impacted them? Are they still able to make my product? Do they still have the same capacity, capabilities? Have they taken on other customers during this time? If I had to slow my business down with them, have they been able to survive so far? And do they look like they're going to survive for the next 3 months, 6 months, year? So you have to look at the financial viability, their financial condition. Have they been impacted? Some suppliers are looking for some short-term cash flow help, especially small businesses. And so you need to be aware of that if you're a large organization, how you can help them out. And if you're not a large organization, you still may be able to help them out or work with them in order for them to stay viable. You want to look at your legacy suppliers, the suppliers that you had prior to January of this year, the ones you've had for a while. Look at their performance. How is their performance compared to the pre-COVID days? Is it the same? Is it better? Is it worse? What's changed about it? And then you want to look deeper than just what's changed, but why has that changed? And if it's changed for the better, how do you sustain that? If it's changed for the worse, what's the root cause? So you want to work with your supplier to understand the root cause and understand their process, their plan to get back on track. So maybe they've been impacted by a product mix. They had to make parts, more parts, because they did something that had to relate to defense or health industries or whatever. So maybe their mix has changed and now they have to change it back, or maybe they're not going to be able to change it back, and you need to understand where you fit into that new normal for that supplier. So you want to look at your legacy suppliers, look at what's changed, be sure you monitor going forward what changed, because even though you may have consistent performance up to this time, in the next 3 months, a lot of things can happen as companies still feel these impacts and still process all of the fallout from the pandemic. And it will take months to do that. Then you want to look at any new suppliers that you've brought on board. Many companies I've talked to have had to reach out and find new suppliers for something. Maybe it's PPE, maybe it's an extra part of something that was made in China and they couldn't get it. Maybe it's things that they got from 3D printing companies, or any number of substitutes or different products. So look how those suppliers have performed for you during this time. Continue to monitor that. Understand, make a decision. Do you want to keep these suppliers as part of your supply base? Do you want to make some changes? Or how does that fit going forward? Was that a one-time thing that you needed? Remember that the PPE that maybe you scrambled to get people back to work is going to be a sustaining thing for the next few months. So employers are going to require people, communities are going to require people, cities, states, lots of requirements for people wearing masks and the availability of masks. You may want to take temperatures as people come to work. You may want things like wristbands or some kind of badge or sticker that people get and wear when they pass in the morning. They come in, they have no symptoms, they have no temperature, they get a badge that says they were checked, and then they can go into the facility and walk anywhere. I see this at hospitals, I see this at plants that have multiple buildings, more of the campus style. So there's a lot of different things that you're going to need going forward. So what are the suppliers that you've brought on to do those things? What is the relationship? How do you want to move that forward? And then you're looking at your recovery production plans versus pre-COVID plans. First, look internally at yours and make sure they match your supplier. That may take a lot of phone calls, some Zoom calls, a lot of detailed planning and reviewing, making sure that whatever your recovery plans are can be supported by your supply base. Things that were a given and just an automatic assumption prior to January, February timeframe may not be now. Things may have changed drastically. So you really need to make sure you have all of those bases covered. And then quality. Quality may have changed. You might have quality impacts from COVID. You may have delivery impacts from COVID. Again, it may be that your parts were coming from a different part of the world. You have to understand what their issues are, what their lockdowns are, what their transportation allowances are, what their transportation constraints are, and how that's going to affect your company, your plans now and in the next few months. There's a lot of things that may have changed. We're moving into this new normal that we all are projecting what it's going to look like. So your company probably has some of these new initiatives. Many companies are looking at their supply chain architecture. Where are your suppliers? How are they distributed? Where are my reliances? We hear a lot in the news about China. So there are a lot of suppliers in China. Your suppliers may not be in China, but your tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers may be. So you need to understand that architecture. Where are your suppliers? And then again, where are your customers? So you want to make sure you understand that fully before you start making too many changes to anything. So understand where you are, where you want to go, and then start to make your revision plans and your alterations accordingly. So one thing you want to look for is you've got new suppliers. Some suppliers may have changed locations. So you may be able to use some suppliers to change locations. Some suppliers may have multiple locations where they can produce products, so you want to know what's changed with them, if anything, and what's available. Again, product mixes may have changed during this time and maybe stayed changed for some time going forward. They may be back to business as usual before the COVID, but they may not. So you want to understand the product mix before, the product mix now, the product mix projected for the next, again, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, to understand how that's going to work. So supplier relationships are going to help you get this information quickly, succinctly, completely, so that you can do the right things for your company. There are liable to be a lot of changes to volumes and potentially the spend with suppliers. These are things you want to understand. You want to communicate with suppliers. You want to compare with suppliers. Make sure that your projections match their projections and their understanding. Because if you're not buying as much, that means your spend is going to be less with them. Their revenue could be down, and understand the impact on that. Also, you may be trying to catch up. So you may need more product in the short run than you did in the January, February timeframe. So if you do need that, then can they produce that as quickly as you need it? And what is the impact of doing that? Are there expedite charges, overtime charges, any of those kinds of things? Know your supply base. I always advocate doing a supplier segmentation plan review every year. Even if you did that in the December, January time, it's June now, it's mid-year, it's time to do that again. We have enough information now about suppliers to at least begin that process if you can't fully complete that. You want to go back and look at what is value add for your company. Many companies talk about value add. You read any white paper, any kind of advertising, and you see that term value add. That means something different to every company. Make sure you understand what it means for your company, the value that you're trying to get from your suppliers, from your supply chain, and how do you incorporate that. So if that needs to be redefined, then make sure that it's redefined again, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months out. And then look at the adjustments that have been made. Many times companies have had personnel changes because people are working on tiger teams, people were reassigned at the beginning, some people were furloughed or maybe even laid off. There's a lot of personnel changes to customers and buyers, so make sure that you understand those and you're adjusting to those. That may take a while to settle out as well. So companies today, they need supplier relationship management more than ever. The value of a good supplier relationship management program has really increased in the last 3 months. Companies need to make good decisions with sometimes insufficient data and with sometimes not very much time to assess the data you do have and make that decision. So in order to make those decisions quickly and effectively, you want to look at the qualitative and the quantitative data you have. Where is that coming from? What's coming from your organization? What can come from your suppliers and maybe their suppliers? What information is available from your customers, because your customers' demand plan may have changed significantly too. And if that's the case, then you need to understand the impact to your company, and then you need to translate that into the impact to your supplier. So making sure that supply chain is aligned and communicating frequently is very important. So how fast can you get that data? Because you need to make these decisions quickly. And you want to rely on your suppliers as well as your customers to fill in the gaps, to help you make the best decisions, to augment the data, give their perspective, give their ideas. Sometimes it's not data, sometimes it's perception, it's thoughts and ideas. So make sure you obtain all of that. Good supplier relationship management means you have a relationship that you can go and get that kind of information quickly. Cost reduction, again, was a lot of the primary goals of companies. Now they're switching from cost reduction to cost management, at least temporarily. So where your goal for the year that you set in December of 2019 to reduce prices 5% may not be the same goal. It may still hold, but I'm guessing many companies are really now looking at cost containment. So what costs can we keep our current prices? Can we keep the prices from going up? What costs can go down, and then what costs are going to go up? So this is not a unit for unit analysis, but an aggregate analysis, because some are going to go up, some are going to go down, some will stay the same. Another goal is going to be to minimize disruptions. Minimizing disruptions minimizes the cost impact from those disruptions. So that's very important. Whether those disruptions are from shortages, are from quality impacts, delayed deliveries, whatever the disruptions you may have experienced, expect more of that and try to minimize that to minimize the cost impact to your company. Again, inventory levels are all over the place. Some are too high, some are too low. You need them back in that Goldilocks just right area. So if you had trouble before getting parts, it may be now time to get another supplier to help augment that. And it's also important to track economic indicators for commodities, track the market conditions, track all of the things that are going on worldwide, because that's affecting all of us. The economy in general is a big question mark right now, so you want to make sure you keep track of all of that. And then you want to communicate these impacts. You want to be able to work with your suppliers and with your internal stakeholders to make sure that you're sharing information. You may have suppliers that you need to replace, need to or want to replace. Suppliers may not be able to survive. If they can't, then you're going to need to replace them. You may have a supplier that wasn't able to keep up with what you needed, and you have decided that you either need to replace them or to add another supplier into that. Anytime you do that, that requires a lot of attention, a lot of management. Again, inventory management comes in, and then how quickly can you do that? If you have a supplier who has filed for bankruptcy, then you need to move very, very quickly. If you have a supplier who says they are shutting down in some amount of time, then make sure you understand that time, make sure you stay in touch with them, and make sure you take actions to manage that for your business so that your business is not impacted unduly by that. It's going to be impacted, but see how you can mitigate that impact. So if you've decided to multi-source, that you have too much in Asia maybe or in China, then you want to get some other goals for that. So it's important not to just knee-jerk and start changing things, but to look at what your goals might be and then how that plan could be unfolded. You want to look at supplier updates, the status of all the things that are going on. And if you have new suppliers, you want to set expectations and goals up front, define those relationship parameters. And even if you have tried and true legacy suppliers, it's not a bad time to reset those expectations and goals and relationship parameters. It's a good opportunity to do things like that. It's important to know if you're going to understand, if you're going to make changes. For instance, if you have a single source and you're going to multi-sources, that means you're going to reduce volume. What impact is that reduced volume going to have? It's not a good idea at this point in time to try to sneak that up on a supplier and not tell them. It's better to be more transparent, more forthright, and tell them, look, we have a single source here. We are at risk because of that. We need to diversify and get an additional supplier. So let's work together to see how we can do this. It's not that we don't want to do business with you, but we have to make some changes. There are a lot of opportunities that are going to show themselves as well during this. So you're looking for innovation and creativity. You're looking for suppliers to help you with these complex challenges, these complex problems that have resulted from the pandemic. You're trying to make the best use of the resources that you have. That's on the buyer side and the supplier side. You're looking to incorporate, synergize on those strengths. Look at ideas from both organizations, look at resources that you can utilize that will help you solve your problems, as well as helping your supplier. New problems, new challenges always warrant new solutions, a new approach, new ideas. The best way to get a good idea is to get a lot of ideas, and then you'll end up with better solutions. This really does support a philosophy of continuous improvement. It's a great opportunity if you have done some Lean and Six Sigma projects. It's a great opportunity to expand on those. And if you haven't done that, believe it or not, it's an excellent time to go initiate that into your company. Companies are looking for new ways to do things. Lean and Six Sigma, those foundation, those principles offer a lot to any company. If you haven't done those, then look for some expertise in that area. There's tons of books that you can get just on your own. There's a lot of workshops that you can go to. There's a lot of expertise available to help initiate some of that. It doesn't have to be a huge investment, but it can be a great return on a small amount of time and energy that you put into that. Offer to share the pain by sharing the rewards. True supplier relationship management means collaboration, which means you're working together, which means you both might have to take some cost hits. You might have to make some investment in time and or other resources. And there are lots of opportunities to share these rewards going forward. So while you're sharing the pain and figuring out how you can do that collectively, collaboratively, don't forget that you're doing that in order to reap the rewards down the road. So keep the focus on the potential rewards and how you're going to get there. And make sure that you're of a mind to share those. The worst thing a company can do is try to collaborate with a supplier and then try to take all the rewards for themselves. So this is a time when you're going to have to share, and you're going to have to learn to work together on that to get the ultimate solution. Transparency in all of these communications is very, very important. So when you're trying to look for new projects, when you're trying to share the rewards and the pain, be as transparent as you can. This is not a time to hide your cards very close to the chest. You don't have to lay everything on the table, but you do need to share. You need to be open. You need to be honest with suppliers. If you want them to do the same in kind to you, you need to treat them in that way. It's also, as we said, time to look at your architecture. Review that, update it. You're going to be looking at make-buy decisions. I've seen some things that I think are from naive writers who say companies are going to reevaluate all their make-buy decisions. I don't think that is prudent. I don't think it's necessary, and I don't think that's what's going to happen. But there are going to be some key make-buy decisions that are going to be reviewed. The way you make those make-buy decisions, the assumptions that you have about what you buy, what you make, and where you buy those, all of that is a good time now is a good time to review all of that. Make sure that that still holds going forward. It doesn't mean that if you outsourced printed circuit cards, PCAs, PCBs, that now you're going to decide, let's bring all that in-house. That would not be, you could make that decision, but that is not a quick decision to make, and that is not something you can execute quickly. But it may mean that you look at where you buy those and how you want to buy those and who you want to buy those from. So it doesn't mean overhaul all your make-buy decisions for the last 20 years. It does mean consider where you're working, who you're working with, how you're working with them, and what you want to do going forward. It's important to identify alternatives. Again, if you want a good idea, get a lot of ideas. If you want a good solution, get a lot of options. So look for alternatives that have less risk and fewer potential impact areas with the suppliers that you have. So look for suppliers that have more than one location. If they have multiple locations worldwide, can you move some of your product from one location to another? Can the supplier do that over time? Not tomorrow, not next week, but over time, can you do that? Can you change the mix with a current supplier? What I mean by that is if you have a supplier that has capabilities, that has capacity that you're not using, can you move product to them? Can they take on different products, more of one kind of product? Can you utilize other capabilities that they have that you may not have tapped into? You still have to move product, you still have to move, you might have to move tools and you're gonna move some of the volume, but if you're working with a tried and true supplier, you take a lot of the risk out of it. Even if it's a different division, you have that relationship there, you have the knowledge of what that supplier can do, and you have a track record. So you have leverage to use to work with that supplier to utilize more of their business capabilities. So you want to understand supplier capabilities and capacity. You want to look at that not only with the divisions that you're working with, but divisions that you might not have tapped into. Many companies, even medium-sized companies, have multiple locations, multiple divisions, multiple capabilities. This is the time to spread that analysis and really look at what can help your business go forward. There's a lot of benefits on this. It may require some investment, but your return on that investment is going to be worth it. All of these require trust and transparency. Supplier relationship management, one of the foundations of that is you have to trust the supplier and you have to be willing to be transparent, and they have to trust you and be willing to be transparent with you. Again, this is not 100% open the books and let's go through everything, but it is really, I'm going to share with you what's important to me. I'm going to share with you things that I don't share with every other customer or every other supplier, because I feel like it's in my company's best interest for us to work together. You need that from both parties. When you get that, you can get a lot higher efficiency and productivity for both organizations. The value that you contribute to your organization is going to be increased. So your stakeholders, your colleagues, your other functional departments are going to value your contribution more, whether you're on the buyer or the seller side. If you're on the purchasing side and you feel like your department, your function has been undervalued, is undervalued, this is a huge opportunity for other people in the organization to understand just what the contribution can be from a well-run purchasing function. So you can greatly increase your value and your perception and really help your whole function get some increased notoriety in a good way from what you can deliver. It's going to improve your stakeholder relationships, those relationships that can be up and down with the quality people, with the design engineers, with the production teams, even with the marketing teams and the finance teams. You can improve these relationships with better supplier relationship management. And you're going to get more cross-functional support, and you're going to be able to use those resources, which means there's less tax on the limited resources we all have in supply chain. you're going to get better solutions to the complex challenges that companies are facing now. Many heads come up with better ideas, and you're going to get better solutions. In the not too distant future, you're going to be able to handle the cost better. You're going to get cost reductions. You're going to be able to manage the cost in the short run, and you're going to get fewer surprises. And fewer surprises, fewer impacts, fewer disruptions definitely means cost savings for an organization. No, not on the direct price of what you're buying, but on the total cost management, it's going to be a big contributor. You want to make sure you have continued, consistent assurance of supply. Even if your supply is not going to be optimal to what you would like it to be, if you can get continued, consistent supply, then your team can probably work with that. And over time, your suppliers can catch up. You can augment that production. You can find other suppliers. But if you have erratic deliveries, if you have sporadic deliveries, and you don't know when the next things are coming, it's a lot more expensive to manage. You can make better decisions a lot more quickly when you have good supplier relationship management, because you're going to have the best information that you can get, the best not only data, but information, and you're going to be able to make these decisions collaboratively, which tend to be much better results. You're going to have a broader understanding from both organizations about what the real challenges are, the real issues. You're going to have an alignment of goals from both organizations, which just by the very nature of defining mutual goals, their chances of those being met goes up exponentially. And finally, not to diminish this in any way, you're going to have increased job satisfaction and employee retention. Right now, employees may feel like they're really lucky to have jobs, but in a few months, that may not be the situation. As things get back, as things get stronger, as companies realize all of the changes they need to make in their supply chains, some of these employees are going to be really in demand, and they're going to be adding to organizations with people with supply chain skills. So in order to make them happy now and to retain them in the long run, supplier relationship management is a huge contributor to that. So I'm going to leave you with my weekly thoughts. Today I found two to share with you. Henry Ford said, coming together is a beginning, staying together is progress, and working together is success. That's really what you're trying to do with supplier relationship management, is to come together, agree to work together collaboratively. Staying the course and getting through this pandemic together is going to cement relationships and solidify these relationships for decades to come. And working together to be successful, just by virtue of working together, that's success. And the successes that you yield for your companies are going to be more and more. There are a lot of relationships that have been forged in hard times. If you've ever stayed at a Marriott hotel and looked for a Coke product, you're going to be tough finding that. Marriott had some tough times a few years ago. They reached out to Coke to change their terms and to work with them, and Coke said, no, thank you. They reached out to Pepsi, and Pepsi said, we'll work with you. So now, decades later, Marriott still purchases Pepsi products primarily. If you have franchises, you can find some Cokes and some other things, but Marriott put their faith, their trust, their relationship was built with Pepsi. They still have that relationship decades later. Those are two very large companies that really have a good symbiotic relationship. That's very powerful. So working together can create something that you have no idea how big that can get. And then the other one I found was from Helen Keller, one of my most admired people. She said, alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. So work with your suppliers, reach out, forge these relationships, solidify these, formalize these, and make sure that your suppliers are of the same mind, because alone you can do only so much, together we can do so much. So it's very important to do that. So that's today's dynamic dialogue. Thank you for attending. as we're going to continue these, as I said. Next week, we're going to talk about managing supplier performance in recovery. We're going to look at defining and maybe redefining expectations with suppliers around performance. We're going to look at different aspects of performance that are required, and we're going to talk about some metrics for tracking the progress and reporting the success. So if you enjoy these webinars, sign up for the subscription that starts in July. You can go to our website, purplelink.co, no M, just .co, and you can also get the dynamic dialogue registration from the emails that you get. And if you're interested in working with Purple Link, call us. You can set up a 30-minute call with Jane, that's me, learn how Purple Link can help your business, because there is a better way to reduce cost and risk from your supply chain. We have online webinars going on. We're enrolling. You can enroll from our website. We're starting a new one on data analysis the end of this month. I do training for certification from ISM, the CPSM, a Certified Professional in Supplier Management, and Certified Professional in Supplier Diversity, and you can sign up for those. So anything that you want to do there is fine with me. So I'm going to stop the recording, and I will kind of come back on, and I will take